another edition of the Hutchinson Report. I'm your host, Earl Ofari Hutchinson, and as you know, this is provocative community talk radio, both local, national, and of course state events, state issues, and always provocative. There are a number of agenda items we have to talk about on the Hutchinson Report this morning. First and foremost, the number one story in the world, a tragic story. We're talking about the Haitian earthquake. Now, we do know the last 3 or 4 days that there has been, and we take our hats off to President Obama. He moved very quickly, he moved very speedily, he moved very judiciously because he understood one thing. We don't want to see what happened 5 years ago with the debacle, the absolute disaster of Katrina. Let me take you back in time. Remember, then President Bush took big heat. He took a lot of flack, and justifiably so, for doing one thing, or maybe we should say not doing one thing. He drug his feet. He drug his feet. And as New Orleans, the water poured in, we saw the massive scenes of destitution and need and want in the city of New Orleans, and the great outcry, help, help, help. There was an outcry, help, help, help. There was an obligation and a duty to move very fast for relief in New Orleans. The ball was fumbled. Now, the world has learned some things since then. Anytime, we can't emphasize this enough, anytime there's a catastrophe, a disaster, and certainly what we saw in Haiti and continue to see in Haiti is a disaster and a catastrophe of the highest order, you must move fast. Time is of the essence. The understanding is $100 million plus has already been pledged for Haitian relief. There's certainly been a number of private and public donor agencies and other countries as first and second and third responders are responding to the catastrophe. Many are asking the question, and it's a good question, where was the world when Haiti needed it most? We know that Haiti, by all standards, is one of the most poor, or the poorest, one of the most destitute, and one of the neediest nations on the planet, not just in the Caribbean and the Western Hemisphere, but on the planet. The long, tragic, sorry history of Haiti, political corruption, dictatorship, occupation, ravaged by hurricanes, food crises, and certainly labor exploitation and many other tragedies in the history of Haiti. But the Haitian people are resilient. And our great, certainly, expectation is with the armada of aid that's on its way to Haiti, we hope that certainly Haiti will bounce back. But then there's another question. What happens when the rubble is cleared? What happens when the missing and the injured, and of course the dead, and there are thousands of them, what happens when their names recede into the past? What will be the response of the world to help Haiti be democratic, a democratic rule, and also self-sufficient? A little note, 20 years ago, Haiti was actually self-sufficient in food production. It could feed itself. What in 20 years turned a self-sufficient nation, could feed itself, into a basket case for the world? These are questions that the donor agencies, international relief agencies, and most importantly, governments will have to answer once again, once the dust settles. Unfortunately, anytime you have situations, catastrophes of the highest magnitude, no pun intended, highest magnitude like in Haiti, you also have something else. You have profiteering, you have greed. It's always, it seems, not enough. I mean, greed just knows no bounds. What are we talking about? An item came across to our everlasting shame. Let me read the headline. As wallets open for Haiti, credit card companies take a big cut. Can you believe this? American Express, Visa, MasterCard. Remember, greed is not enough. For all the donations, and there are thousands, the donations, of course, and contributions are pouring in from good-spirited citizens all over the place. The greedy banks and credit card companies are taking transaction fees 3%, or let's put it another way, for every dollar that's given in charity through a credit card, the banks and credit cards are taking 3%. So we have to ask the question. You have the loss of thousands of lives. You have tens of thousands injured. You have tens and tens of thousands that are homeless, needy all over the place, destitution all over the place, hunger all over the place, and want all over the place. And yet, you don't have it in the heart, namely your heart, to suspend one time profiteering off of misery. To their credit, American Express, because of the outpouring of rage against the banks for doing this, and it's the banks, American Express said, we will temporarily rescind the transaction fees. All right, hats off to American Express, although that never should have been there in the beginning. But what about Visa? What about MasterCard? No word from them, stone silence. Needs to be something said to Mr. Visa, needs to be something said to Mr. MasterCard. Look, no profiteering, no trading in human misery. Dr. King, this is a monumental, and I guess in some ways we can say really a coincidence. The nation is going to celebrate the Martin Luther King national holiday. Now, today, by the way, January 15th, is the actual date of Dr. King's birth. He was born January 15th, 1929. Now, we are celebrating the official Martin Luther King holiday on the third Monday of every month in January. Interesting. A group out of Boston called the United Institution for a Fair Economy. They have issued every year on King National Holiday, or the King National Holiday, they've issued what they call the MLK Day Report. Now, the interesting thing about the MLK Day Report, and it really ties in some ways with Haiti, and certainly ties in even more with what we see in this country. Their report for 6 years has shown one thing, and we'll just cut right to the chase, one thing. The disparity in terms, gap that is, in terms of income, in terms of wealth between minorities, especially African Americans, and the majority population, white Americans, has grown, has widened, is as big as a Grand Canyon. It's a chasm as big as a Grand Canyon. Guess what? In 2009, the gap was great. Now, you got to remember, this is before the full effect of the recession, some say depression, before collapsing Wall Street, before collapsing banks, so they say, before the joblessness hit double-digit figures nationally, and in some places even more. Before all of that hit, and we know about home foreclosures and many other things that have impacted not only middle-class America, but especially poor Americans, and especially the poorest of the poor, African Americans. Their 7th annual report, issued on the eve of the King National Holiday, found, to no surprise, this is not the revelation of the ages. Don't need rocket scientists, Ouija boards, crystal balls to see this and predict this. Common sense. The gap has grown even bigger. What gap? We're talking about the income gap, the wealth gap, and the asset gap between black America and generically white America. And it's really worth, if you get a chance, to take a look at what's called the State of the Dream 2010. And it's really a great report. I had a chance to scan it online. It really looks at a lot of different areas: median income, poverty, net worth, rate of foreclosures, unemployment, of course, and actually not just talking about problems. You know, in the Hutchinson Report, we do more than talk about problems. We point people in the direction of where you can do something about problems. Empower yourself. Be proactive. Make some change. Do something in your community. Make some change. It also talks about public policy suggestions that would target economic benefits to communities most deeply devastated by the current recession. Haiti, MLK, the banks. And speaking of the banks, we have to say another word about that. Now, not the banks in this case. We'll get off of them for a second. Wall Street. There have been hearings by certain congressional committees. In fact, there's an investigating committee now that's had committee hearings, and they brought before them the heads of some of the major investment financial firms on Wall Street. Right at the top, Goldman Sachs, our favorite. We just love Goldman Sachs on the Hutchinson Report. You talk about skullduggery, you talk about thievery, you talk about no shame about anything when it comes to essentially tapping the public till. Goldman Sachs right at the top of everybody's list. Well, they had all of these jokers that paraded before a committee the other day. They wanted to know, look, very simply, tell us how you can justify when to the tune of $1.2 trillion of tax dollars, taxpayer dollars that is, went to bail you out a year ago, yet we turn around and we find in 2009 you are giving yourself record bonuses. Now, I thought, this is a committee talking, and this is President Obama talking, I thought you promised that bonuses and all these inflated millions and millions of payoffs, millions and millions of dollars that went to you, of course, for performance, when you really didn't perform anything. You messed up companies all over the place in the economy. But you're still on track in 2009 to break the bank in terms of paying bonuses. I thought you said you weren't going to do that. No shame. No shame from Goldman Sachs or any of the others. They said, well, they went through a whole series of things about how we've made some changes. We've shuffled some things around. We're not taking a lot of the cash like we did before. We are even talking about giving some charitable give backs to a lot of needy organizations and nonprofits. Oh, we heard all of that. Here's a suggestion. If you really want to show sincerity about really helping jumpstart the economy, giving back to the communities, and this is a message to Mr. Goldman, Mr. Sachs, and Mr. everybody else on Wall Street, why don't you take some of the goodies, the benevolence that came from taxpayers, and that's what bailed you out, and that's what saved you know what. Why don't you give some of that, matter of fact, even go a little bit further, give it all back. Give it all back to every Haitian relief organization you can find. Why not do that? Do the right thing for a change. You don't have to spend $50,000, are you ready for this? $50,000 on a kindergarten. That's what one of these executives is doing. A kindergarten education at one of the most elite private schools in the country. Another executive is going out and spending $17,000 a night to rent a ghost town in Colorado so they can go frolic and vacation. Another executive is taking a 5-week round-the-world cruise starting in Argentina, Turkey, Israel, and it just goes on and on and on. Vacation homes, vacations, expensive prep schools, mansions, all of these kinds of things, and let's face it, it's taxpayer dollars. Do the right thing. Mr. Goldman, Mr. Sachs, Mr. all the rest of them, do the right thing, even though we know you're not going to do the right thing. Now, I said I wasn't going to say anything about the banks, but I'm going to hold off on this for 1 second. There is one point about the banks and President Obama that I think is critically important. We're going to take a quick break. You're listening to the Hutchinson Report. I'm your host, Earl Ofari Hutchinson. When we come back, we may have for a very few minutes, I'm hoping we can get him on the line, Ron Daniels, who's president of the International Black World Foundation. They're on the ground in Haiti. They're doing great things in Haiti long before the earthquake. Ron's a good friend, good associate. We've had him on the show many, many times. Want to talk with Ron about a first-hand view of what's going on there. Quick break. You're listening to Earl Ofari Hutchinson, the Hutchinson Report. We will return in 1 second. And welcome back to the Hutchinson Report. I'm your host, Earl Ofari Hutchinson. President Obama, he announced this week that there will be a fee on 20 banks. A fee on 20 banks to recoup TARP. Let's just translate. TARP, of course, is the bailout money, i.e. tax dollars that went to Wall Street. Now, what President Obama is saying is, look, and I like this quote. This is a good quote. In an interview broadcast the night before, Obama told CBS's 60 Minutes, a program, of course, that he's been on many times, that he didn't run for president, and this is a direct quote from President Obama. Quote, I didn't run for president to be or to help out a bunch of fat cat bankers on Wall Street. Let me repeat that again. It's worth repeating. President Obama, in the interview on 60 Minutes, said, I did not run for president of the United States to be helping out a bunch of fat cat bankers on Wall Street. Good for you, President Obama. So the Obama plan is, over a period of years, to put a tax, a direct tax on those banks that wax fat at the public trawl, taxpayer dollars. In other words, give some of the money back to the Treasury to the tune of, if all goes well, at least this is a projection, $150 billion. Well, it remains to be seen if they'll be able to squeeze anything out of the banks. As you know, they squeeze dollars tighter than Dick's hat band. I mean, as the old proverbial line goes, they could make an eagle on a quarter squawk, squeal, hands off. So we don't know what they're going to do. But anyway, it's a good move politically, and certainly even beyond politically, maybe even fiscally, it's a good move if you can get a pittance back. And that's all it would be, a pittance back of all the money that we gave banks. So really hats off to President Obama for at least certainly making the effort about other banks. Now, President Nixon. This came across the desk today. Let me go back a little bit. Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader, as we know, took a lot of heat because Senator Harry Reid, wanted to say president, he's not there yet. Senator Harry Reid, Senate Majority Leader, Dem from Nevada, essentially touched off a firestorm when an unguarded moment in an interview in the book Game Change, which came out to huge acclaim. Harry Reid said that he was impressed about Obama, supported Obama because he's a light-skinned African-American that speaks with a non-Negro dialect. We all remember that. And did he catch proverbial you-know-what for saying that? Problem is, Harry Reid spoke the truth. There is something to be said about that. And that is to say this. The ancient line, if you're black, get back. If you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. And if you're white, you're all right. We've all heard that a million times. There is a color gradation. That's not the revelation of the ages or any secret. So Harry Reid, he may have said it crudely. It may have been something that should not have been said that way. But it's an unguarded moment. He thought he was off the record, spoke, had to take some heat for it. Now, this is not off the record. President Nixon, our good friend, President Nixon, may he rest in peace. Turns out the National Archives, they've been releasing documents about the president, things that Nixon, during the Nixon years, said and did. Remember the infamous White House tapes? Remember one of those tapes that was erased after 17 minutes? Well, as it turns out, another tape was released from the National Archives this week. Let me just read the headline. It really tells it all from CNN. Document. Nixon campaign strategists considered racial strategy. What are we talking about that? It turns out that in one of the documents from H.R. Haldeman, White House Chief of Staff, this is what they said. They want to go to every, and I love this, that we should put stickers out in every ghetto of the country. This is 1971 was when this document was certainly a White House memo. Campaign strategy, put stickers out, saying that the Democratic Party is going to nominate a black, an African American, for president and vice president, or they should. In other words, here we go again, polarizing, dividing, and of course inflaming the white backlash. Well, Nixon, I have to tell you, you have to be careful about history. It's a tricky business sometimes. Things sometimes come back to bite you in the you-know-where, even when you think long gone, nobody remembers, out of sight, out of mind. Doesn't work that way. History has a way of being very circular. What goes around in the proverbial lineage, language, however you want to run it together, what goes around comes around. Once again, Richard Nixon, bigotry. Even 30, almost 40 years later, still bigotry on trial. Now, local issues sometimes can become national issues. The city of Inglewood is under the gun again, almost literally under the gun. Huge report from the Justice Department that came out about a week ago. looking at the Inglewood Police Department, looking at the policies, practices of the Inglewood Police Department. As many people know, a series of shootings, a lot of protests in the community, a lot of calls for police reform in the city of Inglewood, and that put some pressure and put some heat on city officials, the mayor and the city council. Mayor, city council, let's make some changes. Well, the Justice Department stepped in and in some ways confirmed what many people have suspected. The Inglewood Police Department has a problem. It has a problem in terms of how officers are investigated, how they're disciplined, if they are disciplined, how their performance is evaluated, how they are trained, and most important, a couple other things, also how complaints, how they're handled or not handled, or maybe even mishandled, and most importantly, when there is the use of deadly force, what's the punishment? Or is there a punishment? Is there even a policy on it? So these are things that the Justice Department stepped in, and by the way, community activists raised issues about the Inglewood Police Department and actually called for a Justice Department full-scale, full-throttle, full-court press, looking at just top to bottom, tear it apart, all the things that need to be done to make that police department, and the city by extension, really a certainly efficient, on the point, really serving the community, not only city, but also by extension its police department. We'll keep an eye on it with the Justice Department. They've issued their report. They laid the gauntlet down for the city of Inglewood and the Inglewood Police Department. No conclusions from this. No conclusions drawn from this. Just simply that the gauntlet has been laid down. The ball is in the court of Inglewood city officials and the police department. We will keep our eye very closely to see how that goes. And by the way, this has not just local implications, but national implications. When the Justice Department steps in and looks at a police department, it's called a pattern and practice investigation. And it's been done certainly in LA. PD operated, and the city of LA operated for 7 years under a consent decree from the Justice Department. Same problems, same issues that we see in Inglewood. Pittsburgh, Miami, Chicago, Philadelphia, Oakland, they all were under Justice Department consent decrees, pattern and practice investigation. So why would Inglewood be any different? So I think what we're saying here and seeing here is when a federal agency, and certainly the Justice Department is a federal agency, when they step in, a city and city officials, in this case it's Inglewood or any other city, you better take note. You better pay attention, and most importantly, you better make the change. The importance of Haiti is a couple of things, and we circle back on that again. One of the things that we have seen in monumental catastrophes, disasters, and tragedies, and where people, of course, rush in, people of goodwill, and even nations and donor relief agencies, and in this case, President Obama, has stepped in and said, we're going to help, and we're going to help fast. Those are great things. But that's money, and those are material things. Something else, the lives of people. Do you realize how many thousands of people, not just talking about dead and injured, that are missing? It's important for family members that are expatriates that live in another country, and in this case, whether it's Los Angeles or other cities, there are Haitian American communities. What I think is important is, as we saw after Katrina, is to relocate and help people locate and relocate, as a matter of fact, loved ones, family members, relatives, and friends. One of the most stressful things that can happen to a family is when they don't know where a loved one, a family member, a relative is, all the same. They don't know, have no knowledge, don't have any clue, don't know anything. We like to do what we can here. The Hutchinson Report has launched what we call Operation Haitian Missing Person. And that is really bringing those in the Haitian American community, Los Angeles and other cities nationally, because we are national in scope and reach, bringing them together and providing a service. If you have a loved one that's missing, haven't heard from anywhere in Haiti, let us know. What we will do is we will work with the International Red Cross and other agencies that have a missing person registry and try to help find that person. It's a stressful time for all. We want to do anything, and I can't emphasize that enough, anything to assist, to aid, and comfort. No, we're not the banks. We're not the credit card companies that take. We give wherever we can. So these are some of the issues that I think are critically important. And there's one more thing we want to say. Tiger Woods. And we're not going to get into Tiger about what he did or didn't do with mistresses, his wife and his children and all the gossip and scandal. We've talked enough about Tiger Woods. On a positive note, and we're going to spin it in a positive way about Tiger Woods, and we always like to end on a positive note. Get hope. That's the mission of a good, informative, community-based radio/TV show. We wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't do that. It was announced today that Tiger Woods, through his foundation, will give $3 million to Haitian relief. Hats off to Tiger Woods. He's gotten a bad rap. He's gotten, and some might say deservedly so, and we're no conclusions. We're not taking sides one way or the other. Anybody can do that, and everybody has done that over the past 2 weeks. Suffice it to say, isn't it a great thing to see someone like a Tiger Woods and hopefully encouraging others to do the same thing? Angelina Jolie, Brad Pitt, they gave $1 million. Clooney's given $1 million. These are good things. So we encourage that. Hats off to Tiger Woods. In any case, we always want to say, as we do on the Hutchinson Report, to leave you with this thought. Stay positive, stay productive, and most important, stay independent. Remember one thing, on that great day of judgment, you will have to answer one question. Not about your wealth, not about your status, not about your education, not about your power. One question. What did you do to change, and what did you do to make it better for humanity? Hope you have the right answer to that. You've been listening to the Hutchinson Report.